Good evening. The Board of Commissioners is a governing body of Clatsop County. All county service districts for which this body so acts and as the Clatsop County Local Contract Review Board is now meeting in regular session. Please join me for the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Nestor?
Here.
Commissioner Clement?
Here.
Commissioner Lee?
Here.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Here.
Commissioner Thompson?
Here.
I would like to remove item 8A from agenda approval. We're going to table that. So we had a memo. There's some, we're going to extend the opportunity for folks to, another 30 days for folks to get their filing in for the Planning Commission position. And other than that, I would look for a motion to approve the agenda with the removal of item 8A.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second to remove, to approve the agenda with the removal of item 8A. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next up, we have the presentation tonight on the Reproductive Health Program. Good evening.
Good evening. This is Mike McNichol, Clatsop County Public Health. I thought it would be a good idea to have a discussion about the reproductive health program. We had over the last few years, we've been doing it one way, and now all of a sudden the state has changed it entirely. So Dr. Erfling and Don Burgess in our office have been working really hard to get us recertified to do family planning again. And I just wanted to give her an opportunity to talk about those changes because it's not something that most people know about. Dr. Erfling has been with us for 17 years now, and we're very happy to have her on board, and I'll let her go ahead and take it from here.
Thank you, Mike. So, hi.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. I think it's been about a year ago or so that I was here just kind of reporting on what reproductive health program offers in Clatsop County. And in general, the offerings are identical. It's just that the funding sources have changed. So, maybe not the funding sources, but the way the funding is allocated has changed. So in January, House Bill 3391 was passed, and this implemented the Reproductive Health Equity Act in Oregon. And Oregon, kudos to our state because they really have done a lovely job of really protecting reproductive health rights, where, our current administration really is looking at ways to remove funding for a lot of sources of reproductive health. Our state has really stood up. So I'm very honored to be practicing reproductive health in this state for that reason and many others. So essentially, the population that we serve is really open to all citizens of Clatsop County, whether you have insurance or not insurance. What changes here is that our undocumented residents are now able to be covered. We were offering services for these residents already, but that service would be basically slid off, something that we would be paying for through maybe not so much county dollars, but through the Title X funds, and now we're able to be fully reimbursed for their services. This is also true of citizens that we're seeing from across the river. So again, those citizens would slide off typically on our sliding scale fee, and now we can be reimbursed. So it's really much more of an enhancement of our services and our reimbursement rather than a change of our services, but I think it's something that we should be aware of and help promote as far as getting more clients into the health department. To that end, some of the goals we're implementing to help do that is that we'd like to continue doing outreach. Certainly I'm speaking at all the local high schools. I think the only high school I haven't spoken to in the county is Seaside, who the health teacher there seems pretty well versed and is happy doing it on their own. But I've been to Napa and Warrenton and here in Astoria. I would like to continue doing outreach to the ESL students in this coming year to, again, help to promote the fact that we have this in advanced services for their community. And then we also are looking at having the goal of more LGBTQ training for our staff, as well as trying to enhance that footprint in our clinic itself. So we have Tessa,
Scheller.
thank you, coming to speak to at our staff meeting in August. So those are some of the steps we're taking internally, and hopefully we'll continue to provide really lovely reproductive health services for our county. That's kind of my little nutshell.
Did you get the, an email from AOC about Senator Wyden had that just passed to help increase money to rural communities for video, or I just read it just before I came in here.
I literally just came back from vacation, so it's possible it's in my inbox, but I have not gotten to any emails today.
Thank you for
It
accommodating.
was a positive thing. Oh, Wyden praises increased funds for rural health care program. That raised the cap from 400 million to 571 million.
You know, Wyden is coming, I know this because he's going to speak at the Fort George.
Capacity for
Awesome. Well, I will look into that, or maybe we'll look into that and see if we
I'll send it
can.
to Mike.
Yeah.
I think Senator Wyden's going to be.
Senator Wyden's going to be at the Level Building speaking on Sunday. Yeah. So that'd be a good question to ask at that point.
Thanks for that update. Is there any questions we have for staff? You guys are doing such a good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question. In tonight's paper, they have the problem with the federal grant to prevent youth and drug and alcohol abuse in North Coast. Anybody want to talk about that? $625,000 that we no longer coming this way.
You probably know more about that than I do.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's not a county grant.
Oh, I know that it's a federal grant. But
Yeah,
I was
so,
just
but it
wondering-
wasn't something that came to us. You know, it was based in a community-based nonprofit. And obviously, at some point, I guess there was some reason, you know, why, you know, one of the nonprofits, I guess that was involved, stepped out of that. But I don't know all the details of what happened or why.
Okay, so it had nothing to do with the county at all? Okay.
No.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Now we're going to move on to business from the public. This is an opportunity for anyone to give a 3-minute presentation about any item on the agenda except public hearings or any other topic of county concern that is not on the agenda. People wishing to speak during the business from the public must sign out and fill out a public comment sign-in card. I have one guest tonight. Is there anybody else that needs to fill out a card before we begin? I see, okay. Susan Gladwin, come on up, state your name and address for the record. Thank you for coming.
Hood to Coast, which is,
Yeah, there's no public hearing on Hood to Coast tonight.
so I speak now, okay.
Yeah.
Susanna Gladwin, 82316 Highway 103, Seaside, Oregon, 97138. I just wanted to make a few comments about the Hood to Coast, and I know this is on county roads and they're not many, but the Hood to Coast really locks down the Jewel area, Highway 202, and really makes entering it from county roads really difficult. And I think that's an important thing to look at, about how impossible it is to move around Highway 202 and the different roads that the Hood to Coast impacts. The other thing, I don't know if you get any kickback from all the taxes raised from it, but I don't know if they declare their volunteers. I was part of the Elsie Van Maple CERT team, and I was interviewing people coming through, and they are mandated to provide 1 or 2 per team, 1 or 2 volunteers that should be an in-kind tax filing, and then get more taxes from the Hood to Coast. And I don't know if that would impact Clatsop County, those taxes coming in, and I don't know if the family that runs Hood to Coast owns it, basically files those volunteer positions.
Good question, I don't know.
I have to check it out.
So what you're saying is that they're mandated to give us some taxes and you're wondering if we're collecting them?
No, I mean, as a landlord, if I do in-kind rental stuff, so I get labor instead of cash, well, the teams pay up money, but they also have to provide, I think they said 2 volunteers per team to work on the Hood to Coast, which makes me wonder if that should not be an equal of monetary value for people working on the Hood to Coast. There's a whole variety of things that those volunteers work to, make it go forward, not just being runners. I just wanted to comment on those. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking for a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion to second to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Could I just say at some point, I want to hear about what to do about the cattle on the dike in Warrenton. So,
I would definitely, yeah, that's interesting. I've heard that before, and I know exactly where it's at too. And I'm sure the county manager will help you
deal with cattle on the dike in Warrenton.
in a direction on that. I'll fill in.
First I've heard of it, but.
I'll fill it in, Cam. It's on one of the reports from one of the diking districts.
Yeah, and dikes and levees and floodgates are a big deal, so I'm newly alerted to the importance of that. So I'm willing to pull it from the consent calendar, but I want follow-up, please.
Very good. Okay, now we're going to start a public hearing. This is a time set for public hearing on Ordinance 1805, marijuana facilities, time, place, and manner regulations. May we have the staff report, please?
Yes, good evening, Gail Henriksen, Community Development Director. Back about a year ago, the board held a work session to discuss possible time, place, manner regulations associated with uses related to marijuana. We've put together as staff, after reviewing ordinances from several different counties and cities throughout the state, regulations that are intended to address this. We've broken it down into several different types of uses, which is the production, which would be the growing and harvesting of marijuana, the processing, which would be, converting it into other types of products. We look at wholesaling, retailing, research, and testing of marijuana products as well. The intent is to address issues associated with odor from the product, with concerns about proximity to minors and other places where you may not want to have exposure to marijuana products. So, for example, if you're an outdoor grow, we have requested that you have a 100-foot setback from your property lines with any outdoor growing activities, and again, an attempt to control odors. If you're in an enclosed building, there would be requirements to have a carbon filtration system to keep your doors and windows closed to the maximum extent possible. So that is just people coming in and out so that you're not opening up your greenhouse and airing it out, much to the distaste of your neighbors. We've also put in noise requirements regarding generators, requirements regarding lighting, security cameras that would apply to all types of marijuana uses, whether it's production or retail or research or anything in between. We did put in separation requirements, but those are only specific between retail facilities, and that may be something the board would like to consider, should that apply to all types of marijuana activities. With regard to the separation among retail facilities, it would apply to both recreational and medicinal retail facilities. You would have to have a 1,000-foot separation between another retail facility. You'd have to be 1,500 feet from a school or a church or a public playground, again, for just the retail facilities. We didn't put that in for wholesale. We didn't put that in for production sites or processing. But again, that may be something the board would like to discuss and consider. Yes.
If I may.
Go ahead. I had a couple
So I'm a little confused about that. So what you're saying is for the retail market of either medicinal or recreational, they can't have Can't be like Starbucks where you have one in every corner.
Right.
There's a certain distance between them.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
But that's not true for wholesale.
Correct.
Why is that?
We looked at retail as probably the most intense use that might come out of this. So you're generating traffic possibly on a regular basis during business hours. You're bringing in more people on a regular basis, and that would be the place where you'd see the greatest impacts potentially from, noise or, traffic or anything else.
Is there wording in there for parking for the retail facilities? They have to have so much parking for so much?
Yeah, it would just fall under our general retail parking, which I believe is 3 parking spaces or 3.5 for every 1,000 square feet.
And the changes in the noise and the odor and whatnot, that does not apply to folks that already have their permit, is that correct?
That's correct. So it's not retroactive. It would be moving forward from 30 days after adoption.
So the neighbors that are upset are just going to have to continue living with that situation because we didn't do this in time, is that correct?
Yeah, if there's not a retroactive clause in this ordinance, then the people who are there now and their neighbors are in the same situation 30 days from now or 30 days from adoption.
Would we be able to put a retroactive clause in this ordinance?
I believe that we probably could. I'm going to defer to county council, but
I'm sorry.
could we put a retroactive date on the time, place, manner ordinance?
I don't believe so, but I'm going to defer to Land Use Council on that. I've never seen that done.
I mean,
before.
if there's a reason to have this, because what's happening is causing problems, then because we didn't have this in place, the people that are already there can go ahead and do whatever they want
Forever.
to infinity.
Yeah.
That's how I'm reading it. Am I wrong on that?
I'm following.
Well, if there's a problem with odor from these plants, from the process or whatever, there's a problem with noise. If you already have your permit, these new regulations are not going to apply to you.
Well, but also, I would just mention, these regulations apply to the retail sales. We don't regulate the processing or the growing. That's done at the state level.
So what do we, that's
What-
not how I read it.
We're not going to license processing and growing, but we did put requirements in the ordinance that talks about odor and setbacks if you're an outdoor grow site, if you're an enclosed building, how your filtration system works. The noise ordinance or the noise regulations, security cameras, lighting, odor apply across the board to production all the way up to research and testing.
So that's a good question,
So,
because there are some constituents who would like this to be retroactive. My hunch is we aren't allowed to do that, but I think it makes sense to ask so that we at least ask the question.
Or,
Yeah,
once
I
they
mean-
get a permit, how long does that permit last?
the permit is good as long as they keep their business active, so.
Do we know how many businesses we have in the county right now?
3 or 4.
Yeah, in terms of retail, I actually wrote this down.
In unincorporated areas of the county, we have 3 or 4, right?
Retailers, we have 4. Recreational grow sites, there's 9 listed in the county, but it doesn't say if it's incorporated or unincorporated. In terms of medical grow sites, there are 158, and we do not have any licensed medical dispensaries at this time, and no licensed research and testing facilities.
The only question I have is, in reviewing everything, there's a couple issues that I brought up early on. And does the county have a sign ordinance?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, we do.
And so basically, so the county already has an existing sign ordinance. It was, we talked about sign sizes and signs and off this, and basically the recommendation is that we go, it's the same as the county's regular sign ordinance.
Right, so for a retail use, for example, a site or a business gets up to a maximum of 200 square feet, but no sign can be bigger than 32 square feet.
Okay.
So,
I was on the planning commission. We spent months talking about signs and free speech and what could be said.
And I just brought that up simply because I wanted a little clarification on that. And the other issue that I brought up in the work session, Yeah, that's it. That's all I had. That's the only concern I had. Was curious about the sign.
I have some more too.
Yeah, well, go ahead, Sarah. We'll start over here.
Okay, yeah, so it's defined, marijuana is defined as a crop for the purpose of farm use.
Correct.
But you can't have a farm stand on the same farm where there is some section that's growing marijuana?
Yes, and that's, again, out of state statute. The state prohibits having farm stands for marijuana products.
Oh, but they could have a farm stand for vegetables.
Right, but not for anything related to
Okay.
marijuana.
It wasn't clear, so
Okay,
that's.
sorry.
No, thank
I
you.
think one thing that kind of take into consideration, because this kind of came up on our last, talking about the last issue, is the state, when it has very strong rules that override county rules concerning agriculture and forestry.
Yeah.
And that connects to the spraying issue. And we saw what happened with, and then GMOs. It's really almost impossible for a county to impose regulations on agriculture and forestry because of this, or the state really historically has wanted to control those two industries. And so I just wanted to throw it out there. I think we've ran into that before, and I just wanted to clarify that. And I know it's confusing because when you've got a farm and then they want to have a retail store at the same place or a farm store, I mean, those things need to be clarified. Okay, Commissioner Sullivan, go ahead, and we'll move on to you. Or did you want to? Are you done? Okay.
Commissioner Thompson could go.
Okay.
Commissioner Thompson, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, so I looked at the recitals. I didn't understand the second whereas, that we have little experience with this, with these types of businesses. I thought, do we have to have that in there? I just wondered.
Again, I defer to county council.
You don't have to have that in there. That was, this ordinance was drafted by AOC at the start of this whole marijuana legalization thing.
Yeah.
And we've adopted it for Clatsop County's language, and if you don't want that in there, there's no reason it has to be in there.
Just because it's true doesn't mean we should say it. I don't know.
I can see that's kind of, doesn't need
Yeah.
to be in there.
I want to inspire confidence, and when I look at that, my confidence is not inspired.
Well, we can strike that from the ordinance, that's fine with me. Is there anybody have a problem with that? Yeah,
Okay.
I hear you loud and clear. It's like,
Okay.
oh, we don't know what's going on.
Yeah, let's not say that. All right. I love the part about the clear and objective standards. It says processing doesn't include packaging or labeling, and I wondered why not. I'm on page 150 of our packet. Is that state regulated, or is that something we decided? Or I assume it's state, but
Yeah, I'd have to double check that one. Some of this information came from a brochure that Heather Hansen had put together, and I'd have to see if she pulled that from state ordinance or not.
I don't know. It just caught my interest. I didn't quite see that.
Yeah, another concern I've had, and you hear, and I know you too, and this is going to come out, is that, we got retail packaging of candy.
Yep.
Or medibles,
Yep.
and that's a big problem, and I think any opportunity the county has to weigh in on that, we should. But I think the last time I looked into it, it was basically the state's got that.
Yeah, and I know it's a state concern. Rob Bovett at AOC has been very active in this. Our council knows that and coordinates nicely. So I appreciate that wherever we can exert control so that public safety is maintained, we're going to be doing that. On page 151, 5.12.040, A1B, I had to write out a formula when you talked about the filtration system. And what I had was length times width times height, and all of that is divided by 3. Did I get it right when I read the narrative?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. That would just make it clearer for me.
We can put an actual formula in there, written out and kind of mathematical equation if you'd like.
Not my strongest suit, so I take all the help I can get. On a little further down, item E, doors and windows shall remain closed. Are we allowed to require a 2-door system so that there's in fact a door lock kind of thing to better control access and odors and all that? I didn't know if that were necessary, but I wanted to raise it.
Yeah, I think, I may be wrong, Gail, but I think, Commissioner, doesn't that apply to retail?
No, this applies to everything.
All of it.
Everything, so
Yeah,
if
all the
you have a
uses.
grow, you need to
Indoor
have the
grow.
doors and windows remain closed, even if it's a retail or a grow.
Yeah.
Except for, and because that's where the filtration system comes in.
What if it's grown outside?
If it's grown outside, obviously the filtration system doesn't apply, but we are requiring now, or would require a 100-foot setback from all property lines and from adjacent dwellings, so.
So I just wondered, a two-door system traditionally, in Alaska, we had a door lock system, and that was the way that we controlled. So it came to mind. It's not required, it's just an idea. I love that you, in G, you had an alternative odor control system. I wondered what it might be, or are you just leaving it open for their creative engineering expertise?
Yeah, if their engineer wants to sign and seal something, we'll look at it. I'm not qualified to say what an alternative would be.
Okay, good. And I love that you're putting the science in there. So it isn't, these are the clear and objective standards, and that you're doing it every step of the way, and I really appreciate that. I think this is well written. Security cameras, directed to record only the subject property and public right-of-way. How come?
Well, you don't want your cameras pointing onto your neighbor's property. So you want to keep everything contained, or if it's a public right-of-way where anybody could have that ability to record.
I get it. So I just read a murder mystery, and somebody tilted the way the security camera was recording. So I don't know if we're going to, back to what you and I were discussing just before the meeting about the monitoring, the enforcement capacity, but I would hope that when we do have enforcement, that they're checking the security cameras, that they're recording, and that they're recording what they should be and not what they shouldn't be. Waste management, where does it go? Does it go to a landfill? It can't be burned?
They cannot burn it. I guess there are certain requirements that OLCC has, and I do not know what those are, and how they manage and reintegrate that waste into the system. But I don't know what those standards are specifically.
I had visions of marijuana compost.
One thing that is kind of connected to this, I was talking to the AOC about this, one of the marijuana policy people, and Clatsop County isn't really a very good spot to grow.
Too wet.
It's too wet up here, and the prime area that is down in the south, in the Siskiyou area, and down in the southwest of the state. And so I think that we're not going to really have that big problem of big outdoor or even indoor grows here because
Tell it to Jules School.
yeah, well, we went through that, and that kind of petered out on its own. So yeah, so that's just I just wanted to lay that out. So we're not going to have the problems that they're having in the south.
It's not going to be that bad, but there's global climate change.
But it's good that we're getting in front of this and taking care of
front of
these
it.
things and laying the groundwork, and we can always go back and visit this stuff.
Okay, so down at the bottom, second line from the bottom on 151, underlying zone or be located a minimum of 100 feet, and I think that's a typo, you want from rather than form.
I will take your word for that. I don't see it, but yes, we don't want any forms, we want fronts.
100 feet from an existing dwelling. So we've got
Okay.
100, okay.
We got that again on 4C,
Okay.
152.
Spell check, Kershew spell check.
And
Okay.
just for an FYI, it was pointed out to me that, a lot of these marijuana places in the cities are staying up until 10 p.m., and our ordinance is 8 p.m. And I'm not sure if some of the other retail outlets that are in an unincorporated, I don't know if you know this, Gail, are any of these operations open until 10 p.m. in the unincorporated? I see Tita nodding her head,
She would know.
so you would know that's in your neighborhood, so.
Not exactly.
To me, I don't care. 8 seems good to me just simply because, the sooner you get that taken care of, the better off. Keep people off the road, right? I don't know.
Keep people off the road. So I have more.
when public testimony comes up, maybe Tita, you could talk to that if you want. I don't know. I'd just like to get as much information about that. I see there's nobody here in the industry to speak to that issue, so I don't have a problem with 8 p.m.
Good.
Okay, go ahead.
So
Commissioner.
light pollution, good for you for addressing light pollution. Do my colleagues have interest in addressing light pollution in other domains across the county? Because I would sure love to do that.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, good. So if we can put that on our to-do list or
Maybe
put it
that
in
on
the
our
basket.
radar, is that, we can talk
Yeah.
about, find out what the rules are about light
Well,
pollution.
and maybe make some rules, because I've had a lot of discussions about that with some neighbors. There's no law against it, he'd say.
Yeah,
All right.
There are, and I actually used to work in a community that had a dark skies ordinance. I think it's kind of getting, now, they also happen to have a couple of world-famous observatories there, so that's sort of why they did that, but there are some examples out there, I think.
Yeah,
with
in
other places.
Florida, they did it to
Pretty good.
protect the sea turtles,
It's just good. It's just good to have it. And frankly, having worked with criminals, what they told me is people who leave lights on outdoors just make their job easier. That if you want to deter them, what you do is have light sensors that come on when there's saying, take it from the experts in the business. The thing about water, exporting agricultural production really exports water. And so we've got plenty of water now. This isn't an issue for us, but that's like a longer-term issue that when we're looking at water, we ought to just kind of have that in our awareness. The fencing. So what are you telling, they can't use barbed wire, razor wire, concertina coils, anti-climb spikes, or any other similar, you're just saying they can have like cyclone fences, is that it?
Wood fences or PVC, or they can do chain link, but they can't just top it with concertina wire and make it look like a prison.
I've worked behind those, yep, you're right, it's much better, okay. And so I saw that you made reference to the Oregon administrative rule when you looked at size, and I noticed later in the reading material you provided, which was excellent, thank you. They talked about if we're referencing statutes or administrative rules, we have to be careful to update. So how will staff handle the updating when there's a legal reference, a citation like that?
In reality, what we'll do is next time we review the ordinance, we would check it, but probably we would not put it on an annual cycle to go back and recheck references, just due to time limitations.
That would seem to me to be desirable. And I understand the real constraints on staff activities and given the number of staff, but I wonder if there's another way to handle that.
I think county council wanted to.
I was just going to say, when you go back, if there's a different administrative ordinance, if the number has been changed, which sometimes happens, there will be a reference back to the number it used to be, and you're looking at the number that was in place when the ordinance was enacted. So we'd still have the authority under whatever that was, unless they changed the rule. I mean, not the number of the rule, but changed the whole terms of it and said you no longer were supposed to provide a sketch, you were supposed to provide, a full survey or something like that, then it would be different. But as long as the number just is the only thing changing, which happens a lot, it would just reference back.
Right, and as long as we're connected with AOC, and AOC is so active in this area because it's a concern over much of the state, then we're probably okay there. And then I got down to giving out samples. So, I'm sorry. So help me understand how that works.
Well, I guess it's like any other wholesale product you would buy. You want to know what you're purchasing. So I guess the state law allows you to give your prospective buyer a sample of what they would be buying, but they can't consume it on the property. They have to take it home and make their decision.
Amazing. They didn't do that with beer, I don't think, but I don't know. Okay. So marijuana retailing, so no window service, no Louisiana-style marijuana sales, right? No drive-throughs, is that it?
Correct.
Okay. And then in section J, we've got grandfathering, and in section K, we've got future direction? Is that it? Help me understand this a little better if you could.
Okay,
I'm
so item J basically says that if you are already licensed for retail use and you've gotten all your approvals, then these rules do not apply to you in terms of the regulations for the retail. Item K, which says in the future, if I'm already licensed as a retail facility and then my neighbor comes in and says, well, now I'm going to get rezoned so I can build a church here, you now don't have to shut down your business because there's a 1,500-foot separation because you were there first. So.
Okay. Okay, so it protects existing
Correct.
use and property rights. Well, and that seems pretty reasonable, regardless of what some neighbors might like us to do. Do we have or anticipate, moving on to research and testing, do we have or anticipate any research or testing here? As the chair points out, this isn't prime territory, but I suppose it's possible.
It may be possible. Again, as I said, we don't have any here according to the state. I've not had anybody come in and contact me, but and just in the effort of being proactive, since we had this whole chapter open, to just put it in there now.
Well, it makes sense because we've now got a cancer institute. Which direction is it? Directionally challenged that way. Okay, so we do have a cancer institute, and it's been very effective in addressing cancer symptoms. So I think it's possible that we might. I love the part where you put about the 2-year period. The approval shall be implemented and the approval will become void, you know, if they don't use it. So everything I saw, I liked. What I didn't see are some of the things I mentioned about enforcement. I worked as a licensing person, licensing staffer, and we had the power to subpoena records, and we could compel production of information. I think it's important that we have as many tools in our toolbox as possible to forestall people who might tend to skirt the law if they saw a weakness or a vulnerability. And the legal ability to enforce is, I think, essential for any regulation we pass. It's only as good as the enforcement. So I think we really need to be ready to enforce, and I think we need to have as many tools as possible to enforce fairly and effectively. So I'd like to see subpoena power included in this. Does council have an opinion on that?
Well, our code does have enforcement provisions in it in section 2, I think, already. The other concern we'd have to be careful of in the marijuana arena is how much the state has preempted since they do some of the licensing. So I'd have to verify what we can do, you know, beyond what our code already does.
Right. I'm a veteran of state agencies who are theoretically active in this county that weren't really. I'm thinking DEQ, for example. So I would like us to be ready by ordinance to step in if the state somehow doesn't have adequate staffing or there's an emergent local need. I'd like us able to do as much as we could legally, have permission, and then if we need it, we have it, and if we don't need to use it, that's great.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that that's something that staff could look into. I think that I'd be curious to see a little more clarification on those rules.
Yeah.
I think it leads back to my original point, where the state's pretty strong on this.
Yeah.
I think that
We're just local.
yeah, I think that we can go ahead and, you know, begin the public hearing and do the reading by short title, and then we can get some staff response. Yeah, okay, yeah. I'll get to you in just a second. Before we, you know, finalize this, and that's the opportunity for commissioners to really direct those questions to staff. Go ahead, Commissioner Sullivan, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think Commissioner Thompson handled a lot of it. Under the definitions, I don't think you were here at that time, but there was an explosion in the city of Astoria when they were processing oil. And are we protecting ourselves with that? How does that fit into this? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we did put in with processing is that you have to be in an area that's served by a rural fire protection district. So if you're in an area that doesn't have any fire service, you cannot put a processing facility out there. But that one thing sticks in my head. But other than that, in terms of other limiting processing uses or limiting certain other things, I don't think that we'd have the ability to do that because of state statute.
What, does the state handle safety for workers? I mean, those
Yeah,
people
that
were
was part of the
horribly
lawsuit.
ruined.
Yeah,
so-
that was part of the lawsuit. I mean, they were breaking a lot of rules down there, and they were held accountable for it in a court of law, and
So they're in place, they just weren't followed?
It's-
in the-
yeah, I mean,
fire,
they
okay.
broke numerous rules.
Okay.
And, you know, what state of Oregon has, well, we could always say that could be stronger, but the state of Oregon has pretty good well, good, I'm not going to use that word. It has those rules for industrial facilities like that, and the rules there weren't followed, you know?
Yeah, I knew there were a lot of problems there. Under the water, the Oregon Water Resources, it's 4 under the production. I think throughout this you have form instead of from. But a source does not require a water right. Who checks on that water right? Is that something the county has to do? Is that from the state?
No, that's through the state. For our region, it's Nikki Hendricks. She's the water master, and so she would initiate that.
Okay, and then it's up to them to make sure that that's what's happening. Okay. I think that Commissioner Thompson handled, I too agree with the lighting, and I noticed that there was some of that same wording in the agribusiness. So I was going to ask if that's something that's consistent through our code, and if not, like Commissioner Thompson said, let's make that happen.
Okay.
All right. Are there any more questions for staff? May I have the first reading by title, short title only, please?
Ordinance 1805, an ordinance adopting a marijuana code for unincorporated Clatsop County, establishing time, place, and manner requirements for marijuana-related businesses.
Thank you. Does any commissioner have a conflict of interest to report?
No.
None of y'all own marijuana business? Okay. I will now open the public hearing. If you wish to testify, come forward and give your name and address for the record. You will have 3 minutes. Is there anybody that would like to testify tonight? All right, Tita, welcome. Tita and I talked a little bit about the rule for closing hours, and maybe if you could kind of...
I'll share some information. Tita Montero, 135 6th Avenue, Seaside, Oregon. At our city council this week, we had a few owners from marijuana stores in the city come and ask the city of Seaside to extend the hours. Our ordinance has the hours allowable as 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. And they indicated that they were at an unfair advantage because the stores to the south that are in the county were staying open later. And we continued our discussion until our next meeting. So as it happens, I did some research yesterday so to prepare myself. And first thing I did was, let me just pull this up. I looked up ordinances in the different cities. I could not find any ordinances for the city of Astoria that talk about time, place, and hours, that kind of thing. Cannon Beach ordinance, the stores are allowed to be open 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Seaside, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then I was looking to compare it for the city council, and I saw that the county was looking at 10 to 8. I then looked up online a whole bunch of cannabis stores located from Astoria as far south as Wheeler, Rockaway Beach, and Manzanita. Most of them are open past 8 p.m. The 4 that are in the county currently, they have variable hours and close anywhere between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. Another one is open 10 to 10. One is open 10 to 8, and one is open 11 to 8. Now, this is what is on the internet. If you call them, maybe they have updated. What I took away from all this was that no matter what hours any jurisdiction has, people are making business decisions as to whether it's reasonable for them to staff their store and whether they have enough traffic, enough business. When you have, we have 3 stores in Seaside, I think 5 in Astoria, 3 in the county that go between Seaside and out 26, 1 in Cannon Beach. I think we have, is there 2 in Cannon Beach now? I thought there was just 1. Anyway, so that's just a little bit of information to know. Another thing I'll just share with you as far as the dark sky, the expert on dark skies is Tom Horning in Seaside, and our Planning Commission in Seaside did put together a dark sky ordinance, which you might want to refer to.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other public comment for the public hearing? Suzanne, please. Again, state your name and address for the record.
Susanna Gladwin, 82316 Highway 103, Seaside, Oregon, 97138. I don't know where they're cleaning of the people that are growing it. As for people coming and going, it's a pretty high labor-intensive process when you harvest and the cleaning. And I wouldn't assume that these buildings have a very low traffic. I mean, people coming and going. I would look into that, just for the people working there, not for selling, but just for cleaning the product. Oh, the other thing is 100 feet on an open grow would never make it not smell.
Thank you. Is there,
Oh, sorry, go ahead. No, that's okay.
okay, is there a staff response? Is there any further questions for staff?
Yeah, I was going to ask, when I was, and I don't have it in front of me, but why is it just because it's a drug, why is a marijuana grow different than, why isn't that included in agritourism? I mean, why are they separated?
It's probably a better question for council, but my general understanding is that because it is still an illegal substance under federal law and that it is highly controlled here and highly regulated by the state, that's basically the difference, but.
I mean, would they?
Very short answer.
Do they have, are they, whatever restrictions are under agriculture, they also have to adhere to that plus more, or do they have, is it a whole different animal?
It's, to my understanding, very different. There are overlapping areas, for example, with regard to pesticide use and testing for that and how you regulate that. Other than that, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I think the state does have some specific rules that are unique just to marijuana grows, but again, that's one of the things. I was going to say when you asked a question, part of my answer was just going to be because the state says so. But the state has decided to hold a lot of the oversight and regulation of the grows and the processing in-house if you want to. So they have their rules. We're able to deal with these things a little bit, especially the time, place, manner, and also through zoning. You know, they still have to meet county zoning. They have to be in the proper zone, and they have to meet the rules of that zone. But beyond that, really the state takes a more active role in the growing and processing side.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Seeing no further questions, the public hearing will be continued to July 11th. Thank you. Our next item, we're going to move on to the business agenda. Our next item is the, on our amended business agenda is Clatsop County Emergency Operations Plan Update, page 199. Good evening, Tiffany. May we have the staff report, please?
Good evening, Chair Lee, Board. Tonight I'm in front of you with an update to the Clatsop County Emergency Operations Plan. I prepared the staff report and assume that you read about the history when this plan was initially drafted in the form that we see it today, although we've always had some form of an emergency operations plan. I would call special attention to a couple of areas in light of the senior officials workshop that we just scheduled for November, which is designed to help the board better understand their role in disasters. And so there are two appendices that we included. One is the emergency action checklist. Commissioner Thompson in particular has had a lot of questions about what happens, and while this doesn't answer all of those questions, we hope that it gives you some insight and maybe something to push up against and ask more questions if you like. The second is the elected officials declaration guide, which is something we've provided before, but it seemed, since the basic plan is the public portion of this document, and the board is the overseer of the plan, it seemed like an appropriate place to put it. As you're looking at the checklist and how things work together, that'll be a helpful document as well. I want to refer to two annexes that are intentionally left blank and may have raised questions, and that would be the emergency support functions and the incident annexes. Those are portions of the plan which have also been updated, but are very operational in nature, and for that reason, they are not for public use, and they are for official use only document. The board has official use for that document. And so when we update the plan, you'll be receiving that plan in its entirety with the emergency support functions and the incident annexes. To remind you, the emergency support functions break down incidents by functional area: transportation, communications, firefighting, and whatnot. Because of the nature of that, there's sensitive information in some of those areas of the plan, personal contact information, locations of resources, and whatnot. The incident annexes break down according to different types of events. So if you have a tsunami, if you have a fire, what are the specific considerations along those lines? For the newer board members who maybe were less familiar with the plan, I wanted to sort of explain the promise of that in the appendix, and then the broken promise of not having anything but a page left intentionally blank. With that, do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, before we move on to questions, I would just like to say that, we've been working on this since 2009, and I came on in 2010. I know it started, it's been a long process, and I think one of the most important things to remember as a board is that this is considered a living document, okay? And so, meaning that it's continuously updated throughout the emergency plan process. And then also, it's really important that we have a 2-year framework set forth by federal guidance. So we're going to be basically updating this every 2 years. And so it's a living document. So, if we didn't hit everything perfectly on this time, we'll still have an opportunity to really get in there and get into the weeds and find where we can strengthen it. And after we have this plan in effect for a while, then we'll really be able to go back. And so that being said, I'd really like to compliment you on all your hard work. It's been, and staff. And I'm very pleased with the result. And that being said also, but it's a living document. So when I gone through, there's some little things. I know some of the commissioners are going to bring some stuff up, but I think the important takeaway here is that, we're going to be revisiting this document every couple of years in federal guidelines, and we have an active emergency management department.
Absolutely. So the federal guidelines previously were that we had to formally update. They use the words promulgate, which is a federal requirement. It has nothing to do with the county, every 5 years. And within that, I was required to perform annual updates, which were relatively informal, and I would let the state know throughout the year when I had done that. They've increased the promulgation to 2 years, and I think that really is intended to ensure that counties and county officials get their hand on this document and their eyes on this document more regularly. Even when it's a 5-year update, it's kind of a lot to do in the last, in 18 months, and so we, moving forward, are implementing an update schedule so that we're getting together routinely with the affected partners by section and making updates as we go along, and then certainly when things happen, looking to the plan for how we could make improvements in real time.
Super. I'm sure some of the commissioners have some questions.
You think?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So I've written manuals, and I have to tell you, I thought you did a great job. There's only one correction I would make about language, and that is instead of manpower, I would prefer to see staffing, because it's gender-neutral language, and there's a lot of women involved with this. So
Very good.
tiny nit, just trying to be helpful. Really the major concern I have is how do you plan on getting in touch with us so we can do our job when there's an emergency? I mean, cell phone towers are going to be down.
Well, you're only talking about one type of emergency
Well, no,
when you
because
say that cell phones will be down.
During storms, they're down. If there's a fire and they hit the line, I mean, if you consider that it's likely that it's a
Right.
cell phone. I mean,
I would say that that's incumbent on me, but also on you. So I have all your cell phone numbers. I have you in the mass notification system. I have your addresses. And I have access to amateur communications throughout the county. So if you yourself weren't an amateur radio operator, I could certainly find one in your area or get in touch with local officials to try to, literally try to come find you.
To elaborate on that, Commissioner, the board chair and you, we have GETS cards, GET, Government Emergency Telephone Service. And that is a card that I have that basically allows me to basically get it on some sort of special line. I've tested it a couple times. We tested it to see if it works, and it works.
Good for you.
In fact, I'm supposed to get a new GET card for the next 6 months.
I have it.
Okay. And so, but that's a very good question, because you've brought this up before. And so, just if I may,
please.
we've all come up with these scenarios in our minds. So, when the big one hits, here's the way that I've talked to a couple people. I talked to ASC, and I've talked to you about it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to secure our friends and our family. And probably our services will be needed around our neighborhood, in your neighborhood. And so once that gets done, if you have no cell phone service, the best thing for a commissioner to do, once that they're secure in their family and community scene, would be to make your way to one of the assembly areas or fire stations. And that's where your ham radio people are going to set up. And that would be facilitated into basically getting you in a ham radio environment and then into the GETS environment. So I would make my way, because the cell tower is done, the GETS card ain't going to do me any good, right? So I would make my way.
Well, the GETS card will help you if the cell towers are down. It won't help you if the landlines are impacted.
Right. And so what I would do then is I would go to a local fire department that I happen to be at, and then provide whatever service that I could,
Sweet.
And so we just make this stuff up as we go along. Folks that I've talked to who have been in disasters, and a lot of us were in the 2007 event, that's kind of what happens is that basically I talked to a commissioner that was in an event in California, one of the fires. And basically he spent the entire time just basically in his neighborhood, assisting folks that were just neighbors. It had nothing to do with his responsibility as a county. And after his neighborhood was stabilized, then he felt that he could make his way to the local fire department. And that's what he did. And so I think every situation's different, and we all need to kind of think that in our heads, what we're going to do.
I also know that at work, if there were a fire at the hotel, once the fire department is called, when they're on site, they are in charge. It doesn't matter who's the manager at that point, they're in charge. And so there's going to be certain emergencies that we don't have what it takes to make things happen. So
I think Commissioner Thompson's probably thinking about the board's responsibility to declare the disaster and to get some of the necessary paperwork filed. But in an event the size you're talking about, some of those things are assumed at the front, and we're able to go back retroactively, when you are able to get together. So if the earthquake happened, nobody's going to be holding up resources because we couldn't get our board together to sign a declaration.
Or storms or fires or whatever. And you know what? It'll be all the surviving commissioners.
if any.
Well, life happens. So I'm really happy we're having this discussion. I'm really happy that we're considering the varieties of this. It's lovely. Old bureaucrats love manuals, and this is a very dandy manual.
Thank you for all your effort in that. It's good.
You bet. What else? Anything?
Looking forward to November.
Me too.
Yeah, that's great that you're putting that together, and hopefully we can invite the commissioner-elects.
I sent them an invitation already, and Mark Quayla as well.
Really important that we loop them folks in. If there's not any more questions for staff or deliberations, I'd look for a motion.
Where's
I would say if you haven't heard from me, send it to me again.
Okay.
Yeah. So, 8B. So, Chair Lee, I move to approve the updates to the Clatsop County Emergency Operations Plan and authorize the chair to sign the resolution and order and letter of promulgation.
Second.
We have a motion second to approve the updates to the Clatsop County Emergency Operations Plan, authorize the chair to sign the resolution order and letter of promulgation. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. Thank you for all your work, Tiffany. Good job.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to move on to the placement of the jail bond on the number 6, 2018 election ballot, page 349. We have the staff report, please. Good evening, Chief.
I am passing out revised 801s and 805s for election division because if we ever work with billable PDFs and you print it out and stuff just disappears, well, we found out that that does occur. So I went back and retyped everything. Make sure I'm getting both here.
The illusion of efficiency with electronic media, is that it?
Thank you.
Oh, there we go. This is it. Okay, got your 801s and 805s. Good job.
Thank you.
We love our forms. Indeed, thank you.
All right, well, here we go. I've been doing a little lobbying for our ballot initiative here. I was been lobbying some house folks in the state of Oregon, and making sure that they're clear on our points, why we need a jail, so they know what to say.
Thank you, sir.
Is there any questions for staff?
Yeah, I have some questions.
Yeah, please, go right ahead.
What's the title? What title is going to be on the ballot?
The title will be Clatsop County General Obligation Bond Authorization for Jail Facility Improvements.
Okay, so caption,
Yes.
that's
And then the
just,
question being the next one down.
okay. And I'm wondering, when we originally, just these are just some questions. There had been some talk about the OYA building, that if we didn't go in this direction, what's the status of that? Has that been reverted to owner, that the county owns that now? What's the status on that building?
No, the reversion clause says that when it's not used for 12 consecutive months, it reverts to the county. So that would be the end of September. They shut it down at the end of last September. And so, we've let the state know that, we're prepared to take it at that point. They are working on the transfer documents. I don't know if you've heard from anybody yet, but I had referred their attorney to work with county council on that.
So we don't have to, it doesn't cost us any money. That building is coming back to us in September.
It doesn't cost us any money, but having the building has costs associated with it, whether we use it or not use it.
So if this bond passes, then we'll go ahead with our plan. If the bond doesn't pass, what happens to that building?
Well, we'll have to come up with an alternative use. There are several ideas that have kind of floated around, but the jail was the highest priority, and so that's the one we spent the most time, working on.
But it becomes our building. It's our responsibility after September. Okay. Do you have some questions?
Well, if it becomes our building, do we owe money to the state?
No.
no taxes, no anything to the state?
No, we owned it. We gave it to them to use. They're giving it back.
Right, I'm just thinking about the forests, about the reason the forest trust lands occurred was because we ended up still owing money to the state even though we didn't have an asset that was producing revenue or being useful for us, so it's not like that.
Yeah, this has a clear reversionary interest. It's just like the other reversionary interests that we have done with the city of Seaside or the school districts or anything else.
Okay, thank you.
When we had the presentation, the architects of the architectural firm, they suggested that we get as much information as we can out to the public, onto the websites. I haven't been able to find that yet.
Well, and this is kind of the final product that we need to get done so that we can lawfully go out and start putting that information out. We cannot form the PAC until this is completed and done. So we didn't want to put the cart before the horse.
So what we did, and I think it was in February when we said we voted to put it on the ballot, that was a preliminary, and then this is the official. Is that because I was kind of confused when I saw this come on the agenda again?
What you did February, March was basically direct us to do all this stuff, to complete all this, bring it back to you so that it could go on the ballot. Because there's, like anything really, there's a fair amount of work involved in that. You know, we didn't want to spend time doing the work if the commissioners indicated they didn't want to place this on the ballot.
Sure. And I think it is something that we should have our citizens look at, and that's why I'm really interested in seeing that information get out there.
Correct.
You know, and whatever means, because I have checked the county, I've checked to Facebook, I haven't seen,
It can't be until this is
okay,
passed
I hear that,
tonight.
but what I'm saying is,
But
why I'm
we-
bringing that up is because I think I agree with the architectural firm. That's very important, because I know I've talked to a lot of constituents that are interested, and they want to delve into it, so.
Yeah. And we have been doing preliminary work to try to pull all that information together, you know, pending your decision tonight, so that we will be ready to get information out if you do approve going forward.
And another question I have is on the operation. This has been my question all along, and is the operation, I haven't seen a budget on that. How is that? I know you've had several meetings on that. Are we going to be hearing more about that? Are we going to be seeing a budget soon about how that's going to, we don't want to get in this, you know, we want this jail to be successful, so.
Yeah, you'll probably spend quite a bit of time talking about that in July. So we'll be coming back to you with the budget, you know, with our recommendations for, you know, what the budget should be, how we might fund it. All of those things will be coming up probably at your next meeting. So
That'll be good, because I think that's absolutely necessary. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, I don't believe we need to be in a position where other counties have passed bonds for the construction part and have not addressed and dealt with the operational issues. And I believe we have a good plan, a solid plan that is that will accomplish the goal of funding the operations so that we don't end up having a Multnomah County issue or a Columbia County issue like we've seen in other counties.
We reiterated or iterated that concern on the very first conversation about the jail. In fact, even when we ran the last bond,
Yes.
we wanted to make sure that we had that penciled out. This is one of the most important parts of this piece, and I think we have a plan that we'll be talking about next month. Great. Any more questions for staff?
Of course. Hi, Paul.
Commissioner.
I think it's a dandy idea to have a jail. I think it's an even better idea to be able to afford to run it. So I'm very interested, I'm supportive. I've asked for data and you've given me data. I hope I can share that. When we look at, the real cost of everything is always paid by somebody. And I think the community may be willing to be convinced that they should dig into their pockets and pay for this. But I think it's important to reach out to the people who will be collecting a tax, for example, or paying money out of their pocket to give them as much inclusion in the upfront part as possible. I'm a little concerned because I feel as if we're too close to the election, but, you know, we are where we are when we're there. So I understand that. But the way I see my job is to reach out to constituents who are affected by various proposals and ask their opinion so that they have a chance to tell me what they want me to know about it. Because my job, I think, is to listen to them. I'm going to support this. I'm going to put it on the ballot. I will do everything I can to help this be successful, but my way is to do an inclusive form of public policy formulation so that people are invited to be heard and they really feel listened to, even if they aren't always obeyed.
Well, I think the process as it is to get this out so that legally we can go out and do it, and ethically we can go out and do it, and that what DLR presented was a snapshot of what steps we need to take, whether it be the county government or a political action committee, or both in most circumstances, that we're going to be touching all portions of the county and touching as many service groups. The sheriff is committed to doing just that. But obviously he can't do them by himself, and it's going to take the help of you 5 commissioners to push this, if that's your choice, obviously. Because one person, we've done that and have not been successful. So I think we need the full support and backing of the commissioners to get this done.
I will be listening before I'm pushing. I just want you to know.
Certainly. And part of the reason why we're waiting is, as we all know, we get into the silly season, and if we drag on for 6-9 months, it becomes dead. People stop listening, they don't want to hear about it. So the idea is to get a little bit closer to it, to the election time, so we're not bombarding them for 9, 10, 11 straight months.
And I see the logic of that. I would like to have the tax bill because that matters to me. That's essential. Well, people want to know how much is going to come out of my pocket. And there was some sticker shock. People voted the second time around for the Seaside school levy, and they were happy and proud to do it. On the other hand, there were a lot of calls to the county offices when tax bills arrived because there was some sticker shock involved. So if we could let people know beforehand, I would like to know if
we do have that. 21 cents per thousand.
Well, but
$42 for a year for a $200,000 house.
Make it easy for me, would you, Paul?
Well, that's pretty easy.
No. What I'm talking about is if there's a Warrenton voter and they they vote, yes, we want the Warrenton tax levy. So people need to know about what is it going to cost me for schools and the jail so that they can see their total tax bill. And the same thing in Astoria because they've got a school bond.
Correct.
And so Seasides is already there. How much additional? That's what I'm talking about, making it easy for me.
Okay.
Is there any further questions for staff? Look for a motion.
I would like to make a motion. I move to approve and adopt the resolution and order authorizing the placement of the project on the November 6, 2018 general election ballot.
Second.
We have a motion to second approve and adopt a resolution order authorizing the placement of the project on the November 6, 2018 general election ballot. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item tonight is the reversionary cause release for a lot line adjustment. This is item D, page 359. May I have the staff report, please?
Chair Lee and members of the board, good evening. We have been presented with a request to release a reversionary interest in a portion of property that the county deeded to the city of Seaside School District, and then they would in turn place a similar reversion on a property to be received by the school district due to this lot line adjustment. As I stated, the county deeded this property to the Union High School District Number 1, now known as Seaside School District Number 10, in 1965 for school and other public purposes. And this property is identified as tax lot 6100 on map 61015BA. It is being used by the Seaside High School as part of their sports field. Adjoining property owners Linda Isles Martin and Michael Martin are requesting a lot line adjustment between their property and the school district property. And that is shown on a map on page 364. After the Martins approached the Seaside School District, a reversion was discovered through a title search. The school district has indicated that they will sign the property line adjustment deed once the county relinquishes the county's reversionary interest in a portion of that tax lot 6100 needed for the lot line adjustment. And so therefore then we are requesting that a similar reversionary language be placed on the portion of tax lot 6300 that the school district will receive in this lot line adjustment. The county did look at the different sizes of the properties and came up with a value for the difference, and the county is requesting a consideration of $4,050, which represents the real market value of the calculated area. And the Martins have already deposited a check with the title company should you approve this lot line adjustment. And our property management policy does address this reversionary clause in section 2D as attached, and the school district is in agreement with this lot line adjustment and is seeking your approval. And staff is recommending that you approve the transfer of the reversion for one parcel to another and authorize the chair to sign all of the documents once they are prepared. This will take place simultaneously so that no reversion takes place.
You guys see there's no physical impact. They're going to pay the consideration cost. And it seems like by just looking at the map, it makes sense.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, it looks good. I'm glad that somebody's caught this, and this is good work. Anybody have any questions?
I do. I couldn't quite understand. Is it the little A, is it the triangle? That's, I don't understand which part of the,
Yes.
Before shows a close-up.
this one here?
Yeah.
So is that triangle being taken out or added in or what?
No, it's being taken out.
Taken out from the school district and given to the adjoining owners, and then they in turn are giving that little portion of section B back to the school district so that they have a square property.
So this is the Martins property, this larger square?
Correct, correct.
Okay, and then this is the school's property?
The
Correct.
A
They're
is
near to-
currently the
Okay.
school's property, and B is Martin's currently, but then it would be.
They're flipping it so they have a
Yes.
straight line? Okay, all right, thank you.
Swap with money to make up the difference, is that it?
That is basically it.
Okay, good. So, Mr. Chair, I move to adopt the resolution in order and authorize the chair to sign the documents releasing reversion in property A and reacquiring reversion in property B once the consideration has been paid.
Second.
Motion is second to adopt the resolution order, authorize the chair to sign the documents releasing reversion to property A and requiring reversion in property B once the consideration has been paid. Seeing no further deliberations, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Serpa.
Thank you.
And now we're going to move to something quite important, the adoption of fiscal year 2018-19 county budget. This is going to be 381. And this is my, let's see, 8th budget.
Congratulations.
Every
It's
year.
my 8th budget. We've been doing this together.
Understand it better. I feel like I'm an expert now. Can I have the staff report, please?
Sure. It is now necessary that the board formally adopts the county budget in order to comply with local budget law. The attached resolution in order adopts the 2018-19 county budget of $70,135,500 imposes and categorizes the taxes provided for in the approved budget at the rate of 1.5338 per $1,000 of assessed value of all taxable property within Clatsop County for operations, and the rate of 0.05 per 1,000 of assessed value for a local option levy, and makes appropriations in accordance with Oregon local budget law. The budget before the board reflects the budget as approved by the Budget Committee, with the exception of the following adjustments that have either been requested by the board or that staff is proposing as described and is within the limitations of ORS 294.456. There is proposed a $40,000 increase to the Special Projects Fund, and $30,000 of this is necessary to complete a project that was budgeted for during the 17-18 fiscal year, but was unable to be completed due to a time constraint. And as a result of these projects not being completed, the offsetting revenue will roll into the beginning balance to fund the completion of this project. Additionally, $10,000 for a new copier in the juvenile department. This was an unexpected request as a result of failing equipment after the budget was proposed. There is an adjustment of $158,340, which is an increase to the mental health fund in order to continue to provide the school-based mental health services. This is offset by additional revenues from the state to provide this pass-through funding to the county's contracted mental health provider, and these were funds that were unknown about at the time of the approved budget. There's also a $20,000 increase to the general fund in the dues and special assessments org unit, and these are for additional funds contributed to outside agencies. If the board wants to make additional adjustments to the budget, the resolution will be revised accordingly. Oregon budget law limits governing bodies to increases in approved budget expenditures to $5,000 or 10% of the fund, whichever is greater. Adoption of this resolution represents the board's final action in the annual budget process.
Great. Is there any questions for staff?
Yeah, Monica, what is, in the first one, what is the project?
There's a piece of HVAC equipment that's being replaced, and so they're not sure that the equipment will be here in time before Friday.
What is the H? It's
HVAC. It's
Heating, ventilation, and air conditioning.
Yeah.
okay.
And it also has to work in conjunction with the schedule of the installer.
Okay. And the $20,000 increase on special dues and assessment, what is that?
That was what was discussed during the public hearing. The $20,000 is an additional contributions to outside agencies, so it raises it from $15,000 to $35,000.
Oh, I see, okay. And okay, thank you.
Any more questions for staff? Look for a motion.
I'd like to make a motion. I move that the board approve the resolution adopting the budget for 2018-19 by organizational unit, imposing taxes, categorizing taxes, and making appropriations for Clatsop County as approved by the Budget Committee with board requests as well as the staff recommended changes.
Second?
Any further deliberations on that? Okay. We have a motion that the board approves the resolution adopting the budget for 2018-19 by organizational unit, imposing taxes, categorizing taxes, making appropriation for Clatsop County as approved by the Budget Committee with the board request as well as staff recommended changes. Seeing no further deliberations, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you for your good work, Monica.
Thanks. You too.
Our next item is adoption of fiscal year 2018 4-H Extension and Special Service District budget. May I have the staff report, please?
Sure. The Clatsop County 4-H and Extension Special Service District budget. The attached resolution in order adopts the 18-19 budget in the amount of $650,270, imposes and categorizes the taxes provided for in the approved budget at the rate of 0.0534 per $1,000 of assessed value of all taxable property within Clatsop County, and makes appropriations in accordance with Oregon local budget law. It reflects the budget as approved by the Budget Committee with the exception of the following adjustment that has been requested by the 4-H and Extension staff. This request is to decrease contingency by $45,000 and increase capital outlay by $45,000. This adjustment does not make any changes to the appropriation authority that was approved by the Budget Committee, and it is only reallocating funds to a different category. This request is within Oregon budget law limitations, ORS 294.456. Adoption of this resolution represents the board's final action. And yes.
What are you anticipating capital outlay?
So, and Patrick is here and he can speak to the trials and tribulations of this if he'd like. So they actually budgeted to purchase a vehicle this fiscal year, and the vehicle has undergone some significant challenges as far as being able to make it to Oregon. Recently, I think that it's not being able to be built because of factory explosion.
There was an Elysium fire somewhere that supplies all the Ford trucks, and so there was a backlog, and they couldn't make it to June 30 delivery.
What kind of truck is it that?
It's a basic truck, most popular selling vehicle on the planet.
You should come up and.
But it should be fine. It's just it'll be instead of a June, it's going to be a July.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the money is just going to roll over into their beginning balance for next year.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions for staff? Look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that the board approve the resolution adopting the budget for the 2018-19 by organizational unit, imposing taxes, categorizing taxes, and making appropriations for Clatsop County 4-H and Extension Special Service District budget as approved by the Budget Committee with staff recommended changes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second that the board approve the resolution adopting budget for 2018-19 by organizational unit, imposing taxes, categorizing taxes, making appropriations for Clatsop County 4-H and Extension Special Service District budget as approved by the Budget Committee. The staff recommended changes. Seeing no further deliberations, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. The next item is the adoption of the Rural Law Enforcement District budget. May I have the staff report, please?
The attached resolution and order adopts the 2018-19 Clatsop County Rural Law Enforcement District budget of $5,205,330, of which $5,205,330 is appropriated, imposes and categorizes the taxes provided for in the approved budget at the rate of .7195 per $1,000 of assessed value of taxable property within Clatsop County, and makes appropriations in accordance with Oregon local budget law. This reflects the budget as approved by the Budget Committee.
Seeing no questions for staff, look for a motion.
Shirley, I move that the board approve the resolution adopting the budget for 2018-19 by organizational unit, imposing taxes, categorizing taxes, and making appropriations for Clatsop County Rural Law Enforcement District as approved by the Budget Committee or as revised by the board.
Second.
We have a motion to second the board approve the resolution adopting the budget for the 2018-19 by organizational unit, imposing taxes, categorizing taxes, and making appropriations for Clatsop County Rural Law Enforcement District as approved by the Budget Committee as revised by the board. Seeing no further deliberations, all those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Our next item is the adoption of fiscal year 2018 road district budget.
The attached resolution and order adopts the 2018-19 Clatsop County Road District Number 1 budget of $4,298,850, imposes and categorizes the taxes approved for at the rate of $1.0175 per $1,000 of assessed value of all taxable property within Clatsop County, and makes appropriations in accordance with Oregon local budget law. It reflects the budget as approved by the Budget Committee.
Thank you for the staff report. Is there a motion?
I move that the board approve the resolution adopting the budget for the 2018-19 by organizational unit, imposing taxes, categorizing taxes, and making appropriations for Clatsop County Road District Number 1 as approved by the Budget Committee or as revised by the board.
Second.
We have a motion to second the board approve the resolution adopting the budget for 2018 by organizational unit, imposing taxes, categorizing taxes, and making appropriations for Clatsop County Road District Number 1 is approved by the Budget Committee and as revised by the board. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And finally, we have the adoption of the 2018-19 budget for the Westport Sewer Service District, page 401. May I have the staff report, please?
The attached resolution and order adopts the 2018-19 Westport Sewer Service District budget of $195,390 and makes appropriations in accordance with Oregon local budget law. It reflects the budget as approved by the Budget Committee with no proposed adjustments.
Okay, any more questions for staff?
Mr. Chair.
Chairly.
Yep.
Sorry.
I move that the board approve the resolution adopting the budget for 2018-19 by organizational unit and making appropriations for Westport Sewer Service District as approved by the Budget Committee or as revised by the board.
Second.
We have a motion and a second that the board approve the resolution adopting the budget for the 2018-19 by organizational unit and making appropriations for Westport Sewer Service District as approved by the Budget Committee and as revised by the board. Seeing no further deliberations, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And now we're going to move on to the 2018-21 collective bargaining agreement with Employee Union Local 2746, page 407. May I have the staff report, please?
Sure. The county and the Clatsop County Employees Union Local 2746 have come to a mutual agreement for a new collective bargaining agreement. This will become effective July 1st, 2018, and will be good through June 30th, 2021. At the time of compiling the agenda packet, the attached black line version was all that was available, and the union voted on July 20th and have ratified the contract as it was presented to you. The county and the Clatsop County Employees Union Local agreed that effective July 1st, 2018, July 1st, 2019, and July 1st, 2020, that the bargaining unit wages shall be adjusted not less than 2.5% nor more than 4.5% based upon the changes in the West Region CPIU for the May to May period. Overall, there were no significant changes to the contract. Both parties have signed an MOU stating that the county will undertake a review and audit of the certification and licensure requirements needed to accomplish the work of the county, and it is agreed that this work will be completed in the 2018-19 fiscal year with a report to the employees by June 30th of 2019. And then the other changes that we switched from the all U.S. CPIU to the West Region CPIU. Any questions?
I would assume that, pardon me.
Oh, go ahead.
I would assume that that means that it's more reflective of the higher housing costs and other costs in this part of the country. Is that accurate?
I would assume so as well, yes.
Yeah, the West region, I forget, it encompasses about a dozen states or so, 12, 13 states, all in the West, all West Coast. So.
Mr. Chair, is it appropriate, the union presidents in the audience, do we ask her to address us, or do we just accept this and leave her there?
I don't see a reason, but if the union has something to say, all I can say is that I'd really thank the county staff and the union to work together to come to a good agreement. It works for both of you. Thank you.
I would like to say that it was a very good experience this time around working with the management. We didn't butt heads very often. I think it was a good experience.
It was mainly about the temperature of the
We
room.
had a couple of disagreements. We didn't butt heads on anything. But I wanted to add to that as well. I mean, I've been through a lot of negotiations over the years. Really appreciate this one. I think that on both sides, everybody was professional, everybody was prepared, and you know, it's amazing when you bring that to the table, you get something done.
I'd like to say one more thing. They brought cookies a couple of
So that's where we went wrong last time. Okay, cookies. I got it. Thank you so much for your work.
6 months last time.
I had a couple questions.
Sure.
One is the information on the casual worker, that's been changed to temporary?
Yes.
Can you
And
talk more about that?
that's just to be more reflective with our personnel policies got updated as well, just kind of to reflect the terminology used within the state. And trying to keep our language so that way when we're talking about the Affordable Care Act, because there's certain types of employees who after a certain amount of time need to be offered benefits. And so keeping that terminology kind of consistent throughout the contracts and the personnel policies.
So how many seasonal or temporary workers, what type of seasonal and temporary workers do we have in the county?
So like for right now, we have seasonal road workers, the flaggers, because they're doing a lot of road construction projects. And so we bring on flaggers during the late spring, summer, early fall months. In the Parks Department, they bring on additional help to help out with, just maintenance of the parks because the growing season is happening right now. In the fairgrounds, fairgrounds doesn't apply to this contract, but to the personnel policies, they bring on temporary help to help build up towards fair operations.
And are they all hired through a temporary service?
No, they're Clatsop County employees. They're temporary employees. They're not a full-time FTE. They're just temporary help that the county hires. They're not hired through a temporary agency.
But like the workers at the animal shelter?
Those are hired through a temp agency, yes. But these employees that are being talked about in the union contract are temporary seasonal employees hired by the county.
So why is there a distinction there?
Like, why are they a seasonal temporary employee?
Well, no, why would if someone's reporting to work on a regular basis at the animal shelter, why are they listed as temporary workers? Or
we hire them through a contractor, and then in the budget that you just adopted, we will be bringing on 2 half-time FTE as employees. But part of that is because of there's a significant amount of turnover that happens with those kennel workers. And so the hiring process for the county is a much more lengthy process. For instance, like the 2 0.5 FTE kennel workers that we'll be advertising for come July 1. That is a union position. So internally, we will have to post that per the contract. We'll have to post that position for a week. And then if we don't get any applicants that are qualified, then we will have to post that externally for whatever period of time they feel will be appropriate to fill that position. So at least a week, probably, maybe a couple weeks. So right there's a 3-week lag time before we can even start looking at applications. And then once we have the applications, we have to make sure that they pass a drug screen as well as a urinalysis if it's a safety sensitive position. So you're looking at, a 4 to 5 week time frame before you can actually bring the employee on. So by having
that would be moving pretty quickly.
Yes. So by having Seaside Temps, because there is such a high amount of turnover out there, they have pre-screened kennel workers that we say, so-and-so didn't show up for work today, we need a new body. They're able to send us somebody.
I also know that from the volunteer appreciation nights that we have volunteers out there that have spent thousands of hours out there.
Those are volunteers. They're not the ones who are necessarily doing like the kennel cleaning work. We have
Yes, that's difficult work, and and we had talked last year about what the starting wage would be, but
yeah, and we have in the 2018-19 budget they have budgeted for, it's a whole FTE, but what they'll be doing in order to have coverage is they'll be having 2.5 FTE positions that will be advertised for, so they'll fill those 2, and then they will still have because of days off and sick days and that sort of thing, they'll still use temporary help from Seaside Temps.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, any further questions for staff? I'd look for a motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement.
Let's see.
Mr. Chair, I move that the board approve no, wrong one, sorry. I give up, Sarah. Do you have
I was
it?
just going to make a motion, but go ahead.
You've got it?
You got,
No, I'm on the wrong thing.
well, there's no
Right, but-
recommended motion wordage.
But
So if we
it's,
just look at
I'm
options to
close
consider
enough.
number 1.
Yeah, it's close enough.
Option.
Okay,
option
I move to approve the 2018 to 2021 collective bargaining agreement between Clatsop County and Clatsop County Employees Union, Local 2746, and authorize the chairperson to sign.
Second.
Any further deliberations? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously to approve the 2018-21 collective bargaining agreement between Clatsop County and Clatsop County Employees Union Local 2746 and authorize the chairperson to sign. Thank you. Our final item tonight is the Clatsop County Homeless Fund.
So,
May I have the staff report, please?
yes, at the May 9th board meeting, the board voted to establish a homelessness fund, and during that discussion, the question was asked if there was a possible way to provide more immediate assistance and to distribute these funds sooner. The information being presented to you tonight is kind of a twofold system. One is letting the board know of options to distribute funds as soon as possible, and to address the homelessness. And then the second step is what needs to be taken to establish a new fund in accordance with local budget law. So the options to consider immediately funding the homelessness issues is to make a one-time donation from the Special Projects Fund, and this would be the most immediate option depending on the amount that you're looking to contribute. There is currently appropriation authority available, and a check could be distributed Thursday, June 28th, if approved. If you wanted to select this option but hold off until the 18-19 fiscal year, this could also be done, but dependent upon the project completion within special projects during the 18-19 fiscal year, and the amount that you want to contribute would depend on whether or not towards the end of the year a budget adjustment would be necessary. The other option is to make a one-time donation from the general fund out of the dues and special assessments org unit. This would need to be done after July 1st, and this would require a budget adjustment from the general fund contingency unless this change was made at the adopted level, which this got put at the wrong order on the agenda, so we can't do that one now. So those are the two options to immediately fund the homelessness issue right now. As far as options for funding the homelessness issue at a future date, so when the vote was made to establish the fund, the Budget Committee had already met and approved the proposed budget, and so therefore to create a new fund, it would require a supplemental budget. And then per ORS 294.456, no fund can be increased by $5,000 or 10% of the estimated expenditures, whichever is greater. And since at the time, no fund existed, we would have to do a supplemental budget in the 18-19 fiscal year. So that would have to, we would have to advertise what we're doing and everything. So that would take, a couple months to make sure we have advertised it appropriately and stuff. A supplemental budget will require holding a public hearing that's been advertised for not less than 5 days before the hearing and passing the resolution and adoption. So a homelessness fund could be adopted in the 18-19 fiscal year, as I said, via supplemental budget, and have no appropriation authority. And this would give the commissioners time to direct staff on creating a policy, and then during the 19-20 budget process, you could you could assign appropriation authority at that time.
This is an important point that she just made. Are you guys clear on that?
No, I'm waiting.
So
if you wanted to, you could establish the fund during the 18-19 fiscal year via supplemental budget, but assign no appropriation authority to it. And then during the 19-20 budget process, then you could assign appropriation authority to that fund once a policy has been established.
So what you're saying is carving out a space in the budget for a fund, but nobody can spend the money until the policy is set.
Yeah, so we would establish a fund in 18-19. We would assign budget authority in 19-20, and by 19-20, once we've assigned budget authority, we'll have established a policy as to how you want to distribute those funds.
So we could basically the $4,999 theoretically.
Yes.
Under the $5,000. 10%. But we don't know what that is. So we could do up to.
So at this point, you can't assign anything to it because at the time, there was no appropriation authority, so it's zero.
A supplemental budget
Yeah.
hearing. Okay.
Yeah.
So the question before the board here then is fairly clear. Do we want to go ahead and approve a one-time donation, and then we'll have to go down and have the supplemental budget hearing and a public hearing, and then we have the conversation there about the amount, correct?
I'm a little confused, Chair Lee, because I don't see on this paper what the amount is, this one-time donation, and to who.
I did not assign an amount.
Well, yeah, if you've got two things going on here, I think. One is, and I think the chair was just mentioning that, is we only have a couple days left in the fiscal year. You can do something this fiscal year, but you would not have, the program guidelines, all of those things developed. Or you could not do anything and basically start that process. You put a placeholder in next year's budget, and then you fund it the year after that. So you can you take the long-term approach, which is placeholder in the 18-19 budget and fund it in 19-20, or you could do something, but it would have to be now because we're right at the end of the fiscal year. You could do both of those things, or you could do none of them.
We don't have an ask in front of us. We don't have a policy.
Well, we do, and I guess I just want to address that.
It's not here in front of me. I don't.
No, we don't have an ask in writing. Well, I actually do have something in writing, but, I think you're all aware that Helping Hands, is working on the Uniontown project. I've had a couple of conversations, probably several over the last few months with them. They very much would like to have some funding from the county. Obviously, that project is probably going to be up and running by 1920, so the question is, based on that project, do you want to do anything out of this year's budget? If not, then you're basically looking at, again, putting a placeholder in next year's budget and funding that in 19 or 20.
I'm more comfortable distributing taxpayer money when we have an established policy and procedure. How does the money come in, from where? How does it get distributed, and to who and how?
Exactly.
I'm not comfortable just on a verbal agreement to say, because we have the possibility of giving money, we'll give the money. That doesn't make me feel comfortable.
I think we just need to explain it better to you. So what we're doing here is we're putting a kind of a positioning to have through a public hearing. Mm-hmm. And we haven't developed the policies yet. So we're basically kind of, what's the word to use here? Seed. It's kind of like a seed money to allow us to establish this, and then we're going to work on, and then that, I don't know, it makes sense to me. I'm having trouble explaining.
I mean, if we're gonna, let's say we give $5,000 to someone. Mm-hmm. I think a sound policy would be like we do with what I know with other grant programs. If we're going to give you $5,000, you have to show that you're going to match that with $5,000 from other funds.
Yep,
I mean, what is the policy? I know we haven't. I'm just using it as an example.
Right.
But sitting on the homelessness task force for Astoria, there are other people in that room that have ideas for projects. Are they also going to be able to have a one-time donation before we set this policy?
Well, that can be a part of the conversation.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying we need to have the conversation.
Yeah, we're not going to have the conversation until we decide whether or not we're going to do it or not.
But we've already agreed to have the fund, haven't we?
We're going to create, yes, but now we're going to put it, we're going to.
So you've agreed to have the fund, and so what would happen in 18-19 is then we would do a supplemental budget advertisement that the fund is going to be created. And so then the fund will be there in 18-19. There will be no money assigned to it, but then you can take that time to establish a policy. And then in 19-20, when we do the budget process, you can say how much money you want to fund it. And where would that funding come from? that's something that you can establish in your policy. And so some of the funding options could be the sale of tax foreclosed property.
Right, the one that you included on that.
Yeah. So there's different options, and then there's some of, the obstacles that might come from some of those.
We're giving ourselves flexibility.
And I think we need to have flexibility. This is, I don't know if I've mentioned this several different times, I brought it tonight. It's the Clatsop County 10-year plan to end homelessness, 2012 to 2022. I think they've got some great information in here and great suggestions. I think in conjunction with the, what you had from the League of Oregon City, or no?
No, that's actually from the state of Washington.
That was the state of Washington, that's what I meant to say. I mean, I think that maybe we can have some work sessions and to start talking about, establish what our values are for this fund, and then go from there to go get some policy.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to have a public.
I don't.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. We're going to have a public hearing. We're going to have a conversation about this.
A work session with us and maybe some planning staff or something.
Sure.
To talk about how we can flesh out this fund.
Right.
We need to be financially prudent.
But if we don't start it now.
But it's already, we've agreed to have the homelessness fund. Now we have to decide what the policy is.
But we wouldn't be able to do anything in 2018-19 if we don't.
So the options that you have is, the difficult part is if you're expecting this money to be paid back in some way, then it's considered a loan. And if it's going to be a loan, then per budget law, you have to have established what that payment plan to pay it back is going to be. And so as far as just doing a loan from one fund, like the Special Projects Fund, to the Homelessness Fund, you would have to have a payment plan in place back to the Special Projects Fund. That's something that is required by Oregon budget law.
But if we do a donation?
If you do a one-time donation, then you would be able to help whatever immediate need is out there.
Well, it's a donation, so you don't have to identify a repayment stream.
Yeah.
And it's going to be, we'll have money available immediately when we do the policy and set this thing up, and we won't have to do it and wait a year or two.
Right.
But the special projects fund, that's the money that's set aside through timber revenue, is that correct?
Yes.
And as we're all aware, the Coho lawsuit, and I mean, are we prepared? I think we need to start, we're right now in record harvest, record prices for timber. I think as we look in the future, as we establish a policy for whatever way we go, we have to also be mindful of the fact that we could get ourselves back into 2008, 2009, the Great Recession again, or in the 80s when, timber prices are cut by 50%. We can't make our policy just based on the good years. We have to foresee the bad years too.
Well, we do that.
Well,
That's what's been done in the past. There's no reason
Well,
to
that's
think
why
it
I'm more
won't be done in the
comfortable
future.
with a loan rather than a donation, is what I guess my point is, to be financially prudent. We need to talk about if it's going to be a loan, if it's going to be a donation, because if it's going to be a donation, how big a donation is it going to be? Because originally when this came up, it was going to be off tax sales, foreclosed tax sales, the money off of that. And now we're talking about taking money directly out of the Special Projects Fund.
Yep, in a donation.
So that's a big change from what this
Depends on
originally
how
was.
much, we're going to have a conversation about what that amount could be. That amount could be $1,000, it could be $4,999, or it could be $50. But we're setting the motion and process to get this into the 2018 budget cycle. So when we can get this homeless fund set up, we'll immediately be able to raise money and spend it. And we don't even have to spend the donation.
Shirley, I'd like to make a motion. I move that the board approve a one-time donation amount from the Special Projects Fund in the current 2017-18 FY and establish a homelessness fund via supplemental budget in the 2018-19 fiscal year with no appropriation authority.
Second.
We have a motion and a second
Point of
to...
order, point of order.
No, we're going to have...
Well, no, but is it acceptable to have two disparate elements like that in a motion? I'm asking legal counsel for clarification. I just want us to be on the up and up legal.
Sure.
And I just want to clarify what you're doing here, and I apologize if I didn't write this clearly enough. So if you're approving a one-time donation from the Special Projects Fund in the current fiscal year, that means that we can distribute money this year.
Yeah, but.
We would have to. We can't.
Yeah, we would have to.
Budget and public hearing.
No, we don't have that opportunity because.
Oh, I see.
Because Friday's the last day of the fiscal year. That means that you have identified somebody that you want to make a donation to. And then via the supplemental budget in 1819, you would establish the homelessness fund.
Okay.
If I could interject here, I think the motion would be clearer.
Okay.
If you're going to do that this year, that your first motion is that you move that the board approve a one-time donation in the amount of XYZ, whatever you're going to pick tonight, from the Special Projects Fund. And I guess if you're going to do it tonight, you need to figure out who you're going to donate it to. And then secondly, the second motion would be that you move to establish a homelessness fund via a supplemental budget in 1819 with no appropriation authority, and authorize staff to bring that to the board so that you can proceed. And that tells staff they can go ahead and advertise for the supplemental budget and stuff.
Okay. Is there,
So the first motion will look like this. It'll approve a one-time donation from the special fund in an amount that we need to.
Projects Fund.
Special project funds to Helping Hands in the amount of.
do we have a recommended amount?
Do you even have an application from them?
Well,
We don't even have a formal written application, and this is setting a precedent
I'm asking-
that someone can call up and say, hey, can I get a donation?
No, I don't think that's
I'm asking
accurate.
the county manager.
Yeah, we don't have a formal written application because we haven't developed one yet, but I do have a budget for their project. It's about $400,000 that they're going to spend on the Uniontown property. Of course, they've said they'd like as much as they could possibly get from the county. I guess I'll tell you, I mean, they've kind of suggested that maybe something like $200,000 would be nice, but that doesn't mean that's what the county has to do.
Mm-hmm.
So
Two motions.
we have two motions. One motion is a one-time donation from a special fund, from Special Projects Fund to Helping Hands in the amount of, what do we want to do here?
Okay, so whatever amount we decide to donate, can they take that? Will they take that? Do we know? And
Well, I suspect.
apply for
I can't see
grants?
here, so, I suspect that they will, because I think they're trying to cobble this deal together and get money from, whatever sources that they can find to get this project done. So,
Okay. I'll request 25,000.
I thought we had a 4,999.
No, that's just if you're going to do something to establish a fund, but again, there was no fund already established, so there was no appropriation authority. So that's not an option. If you're going to do something in 17-18, there is currently appropriation authority in the Special Projects Fund in this current fiscal year.
you're using existing appropriation authority.
Yes.
So in anticipation of this, there was already money carved out?
No, the Special Projects Fund is a fund that's where a lot of our capital projects take place. So we had budgeted, for instance, $1.2 million, or not quite, I think it was 600,000, for the household hazardous waste facility to get completed. And
Yeah, that doubled from the first time we talked about it to when that doubled in.
But the appropriation authority hasn't been spent because they haven't gotten as far on that project as they had hoped to. So at this point in time, I think $30,000 of that appropriation authority has been spent. So there's unspent appropriation authority within the Special Projects Fund.
Oh, I see.
And that happens basically almost every year.
But
We
that
don't
doesn't,
spend everything that's budgeted every year.
and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But then that money would have to be repaid if the household hazardous waste project, I mean, it would have to come from somewhere.
Yeah, the money is coming from timber money. At this point in time, the household hazardous waste facility, their money is, you can't touch that money. You can't, we can't loan that money. So this is timber money.
Okay.
So, yeah, 25,000 a little high to me.
All right.
I'm just trying to set a precedent here more than anything. And to me, is that kind of a good track to go? I think we're trying to set a precedent here of trying to really jumpstart this fund. And I know that I can understand the concerns Commissioner Thompson has this, and so we're just gonna have to continue the conversation here.
Well, I'm willing to come down on the amount.
Can I get on the phone and call this other person who has a plan so he can get in on this action? Because this is pretty sweet.
Huh?
I think.
Well, if we're gonna be making donations from a phone call, I'd like to make a couple phone calls for people that are also working on homelessness issues and would like to have a contribution.
I think this is not, okay.
Well, it is that. We don't have anything in writing. We don't have a written ask, and we're pulling off the top of our head, let's say 25,000. That to me is doesn't make me feel comfortable. When I know that I know two organizations right now that would like to also have $25,000, but they haven't been in the phone conversation. So how do we decide that?
We had a meeting with Helping Hands, and
I know, I attended that meeting.
Yeah, right. And so we've been talking about this for a long time. There's a building already identified. We have a project identified. So this is not all those other things.
And that's okay if we have a project identified, but there's no paperwork in front of us for us to look at. And I went to the Helping Hands fundraiser. There were probably 400 people in that room. They have been around for 15 years. I'm not saying they couldn't use the money, but what is our policy? Is our policy to help build capacity in the community to work on homelessness issues? Because if that's the case, I have several people that I could call right now that they would be happy to come down and plead their case for some money for another 25,000.
But that's not the issue before us.
It is the issue.
How
are we going to distribute the money in this way? And who gets the phone call? Who gets the check?
Okay, okay, that's fine. Well, then we'll just forget the whole thing.
So Chair Lee,
Fine with me.
I appreciate that we're having a considered discussion. What I see is that we have, in terms of policies, we should have a policy development process. And after we have a policy development process, I'm uncomfortable with staff will develop a policy. With due respect to staff, this is what the commissioner's job is in my book. We help involve stakeholders so that we can have policy development by listening to informed members of the public, informed, interested members of the public from various sectors. Then we can do a policy statement. Then we can take action. Then we can evaluate results. So 1, 2, 3, we develop a policy, we take an action, and then we evaluate the results. We lately, during our budget process, have had what I think is an unfortunate tendency to do kind of seat-of-the-pants emotional allocation of funds. Believe me, we all know lots of good causes and good organizations and good people. So what makes sense to me is that we step back so that we can think about this and involve our community, not just in a hearing, but in the development of the policy itself. And then we can have legitimacy as a governing body, as a professionally operating governing body.
And I also think that we have what we need in place to talk about this. We have the county's 10-year plan. We have other examples like what was included in tonight's agenda from the state of Washington. We had the idea of what do we do with tax foreclosed property? Can we take the percentage that we would get and feed that into the fund? That seems very reasonable. All I'm saying is, let's get this on paper, let's delineate what it is that we want, and where do we go from there? I'm not saying that Helping Hands won't benefit from this homeless fund. I'm just saying, let's get it in place before we start signing checks.
Okay, I respectfully disagree with the logic, because I think that time is of the essence, and whether we make, just to get it going and to make a donation so that we can begin in this budget year is important. I don't think that putting it off so that we get everything exactly like you think it should be is prudent. So, all right, I would make a motion that we make a so one motion. There's two motions.
Right.
I would
Let's
make.
do the first one first.
Okay. I make a motion that we donate $10,000 and to Helping Hands for the 2018-19 fiscal year budget.
Is that your motion?
No, it would come out of this fiscal year. It would be your 17-18
Oh,
fiscal year.
17-18. Oh, sorry. Okay. So correction, 17-18.
So the motion is a one-time donation from special funds to Helping Hands in the amount of $10,000.
Yes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to provide a one-time donation from special funds to Helping Hands in the amount of $10,000. Is there any further deliberations? Seeing no further deliberations, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
So motion carries 3-1.
No, 3-2.
No, 3-2, excuse me. I apologize for that. 3-2, motion carries. So the second motion, council, what's that look like?
Direct staff to come back to you with the establishment of a homelessness fund via the supplemental budget in the 18-19 fiscal year with no appropriation authority.
Right. Okay. So we just. I'll make that motion. Can we just use that verbiage?
Yeah, can we use that verbiage?
Would you say that one more time, please?
Please, yeah.
Direct staff to establish a homelessness fund via a supplemental budget in the 2018-19 fiscal year with no appropriation authority.
So if I could get clarification on that, so that the $10,000 that was just donated, that comes from this
Current fiscal
that
year.
fiscal year that runs out in a few days.
Yeah, it would have to be paid out before the end of this fiscal year.
And
which is
that's going without any paperwork, without any strings attached. It's just, we're just writing a check.
Before we deliberate on that, just as a point of order, we have a motion.
No, so that last motion took care of that situation, right?
Right.
That's
Now we have
taken care
another
of.
motion. And
So
before we
now, that's what I'm trying to,
deliberate further on the
excuse me,
motion,
Chair Lee.
As a point of order.
Excuse me, Chair Lee, I'd like to finish my question. So for clarification for what you just said, this is to get the sideboards on a policy for the next budget year. This is just to put a space into the budget so that we then can establish a policy to go forward with this. Is that correct?
Yes.
That this motion has nothing to do with the $10,000 donation from the last motion.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, just as a point of order, when a motion is made, okay, there's no deliberation until there's either a second, and then after the second, there can be deliberation. So once we make a motion, there's really no conversation allowed until the motion is second, and then we can deliberate and go to the question. I just want to make that point of
Okay,
order.
I
because that's
apologize.
Robert's Rules of
I
Orders.
thought that was done, I'm sorry.
Okay, so we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion, a second, and I'm going to ask staff to, could you recite that motion one more time? Because I can't write down fast enough.
Direct staff to establish a homelessness fund via a supplemental budget in the 2018-19 fiscal year with no appropriation authority.
Okay, that's our motion, and that's our second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Is there an opposition? So we have, who voted?
She said aye.
Everybody voted on that? Okay, and everybody voted aye? Okay. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Now we're going to move on to commissioner reports. Commissioner Thompson.
Hang on a second, please. So,
Thank you, Monica.
Yeah. Busy week. Hang on a second. So since our last board meeting, on the 14th of June, the Oregon Humanities Forum held a conversation at the Cannon Beach History Center to talk about forestry, about different ways of looking at the uses of the forest. It was a conversation not to make right or wrong decisions, but it was a conversation to engage community members in looking at a wider point of view. It contrasted John Muir and Gifford Pinchot and basically the spiritual conservation ethic with the wise use of the forest as a resource ethic. And it was well orchestrated and conducted. At the end, what the conveners said was, what's missing from this conversation is the human element. But we had been talking about social justice and how people are here in the place using the forest as people. So I recommend Oregon Humanities Forum. I have, it's a conversations project. I have a list of web resources and articles that I'm happy to share if anyone is interested in seeing those. On the 15th of June, Friday, there was a dedication in Arch Cape of the roadway sign. John Pyatt was instrumental, and the Oregon historical markers and heritage people came, and we had a lecture on how because of a variety of historical circumstances, Cannon Beach stopped being in Arch Cape and moved up the road to Arch Cape, and Eola became Arch Cape. So that was interesting and productive. If you're driving south on Highway 101 and you come down the hill into Arch Cape, look on the left-hand side of the road. There's a lovely big sign there that'll give you lots of information about cannons coming to shore and the destruction of the shark. On the,
I just wanted to mention on that, that was one of the projects that you approved.
Would you please not interrupt me, please?
Certainly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So on the 16th was the psychological first aid course. I would heartily recommend that for anyone, any community member can attend. You have to sign up, but there's a good book that comes with it. There are a variety of catastrophic events, which we've been notified about tonight. Again, we've been reminded. This is a good preparation for any community member who's interested in becoming more able. After that was a party for George Vetter, Cannon Beach City Councilor. His wife Paula is the CERT team leader. They'll be moving to Bend. So we're losing good community members, but George will be completing his term as a Cannon Beach City Councilor. Monday the 18th was the Community Action Board, the Finance and Executive Committee meeting to evaluate their executive to do preparation for strategic planning for that organization. I recommend it as a process. We had the Finance Committee audit review, the Executive Director's review with his written report, staff interviews, and his self-evaluation. We're also planning the Community Action Team Board retreat. Then on the 20th, there was a meeting held in Tillamook, one of the regional housing workshops, hosted by the League of Oregon Cities, the Association of Oregon Counties, Oregon Housing and Community Services, Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development. They talked about the pathways to address the housing crisis from a systematic point of view, not from, I want to say, extemporaneous donations, but there is a system in place, a housing needs analysis, identifying priority development parcels, those that are shovel-ready residential, to assess potential resources and incentives, local, state, federal, cash, grant opportunities, and so on. The fourth step, convening and engaging partners, developers, builders, planners, facilitators. There was the welcome, there was the housing pipeline from Kim Travis, then there were local stories on addressing housing needs. We had folks from Newport, from Scappoose, Tillamook, all around talking about what had worked for them. Brian Ogilvy talked about what's been going on in Cannon Beach, talked about Goal 10 of the state land use. There's lots more detail available. Here's an important part. They said have a committed county commissioner convene the group that addresses this. A committed county commissioner. They said be inclusive, meet in a neutral place, be impartial, establish clear shared purpose, direct and guide the discussion, keep folks moving forward, demonstrate commitment, make sure there is an outcome, steps, timeframes, incremental progress and successes. So we have partners. I have information from this. Perhaps the planning director is interested. There were specific recommended changes to the codes. So perhaps that's useful information. We talked about things that have been tried. We talked about things we want to try and the role that we can play. The next day, the 21st, there was a cap and trade workshop meeting conducted by the Association of Oregon Counties, co-chaired by Commissioner Cribbins and Commissioner Russell. What they told us was that it's 90% certain, at least, that there will be cap and trade legislation that will be put forward in the next legislative session. Now, what impact will that have on us? There may be some negative impact, because there may be, for people who live in rural areas, increased costs, gasoline and that sort of thing. There is, talking with Dan Brown of the Community Action Team, money that's supposed to come forward to deal with housing. So there may be offsetting costs and benefits. They are, the governor's office is working on this. We listened to an economist. I have slides on that as well for anyone who's interested. The next day, there was an aerial spraying workshop that was held. OFRI hosted it. I went to the one in Newburgh. I brought back packets for everyone because I thought you might be interested. So.
I have one.
You've got one, good.
Yeah, I got one.
You got one? Commissioner Clement, Commissioner Nebaker, would you like a folder or not?
No, thank you. No.
Okay, you're welcome. I'll make sure, Jack, I have one for you. What's interesting is the science that's involved, because they did a demonstration of the science that's involved. It isn't just lifting up a helicopter and dumping stuff. There's a lot of calculations. They said the reason that it's difficult to predict when the spraying will occur is that the wind has to be the wind speed between 3 and 10 miles an hour, for example. Spraying does not occur 67% of the time when scheduled due to weather conditions. One of the most interesting things I thought about this was that there is a pesticide analytical and response center. It has someone from the State Department of Agriculture, the Oregon Health Authority, the State Fire Marshal, the Department of Fish and Wildlife. There's a public member. There's someone from Poison Control. There's someone from DEQ. There's someone from Oregon OSHA. and someone from forestry. They investigate incidents where people are complaining about aerial spraying. And they said you can call the 211 number if citizens have a concern or a complaint. They can call that 211 number, and it will be referred to this PARC, this Pesticide Analytical and Response Team. So I thought that was interesting that it isn't just happening, that there's science and that there is monitoring and that there is compliance, because the Oregon Department of Agriculture does monitor that. Oh, the Workforce Investment Board. I stepped out to participate via phone with the Northwest Oregon Works Consortium meeting. They were meeting here in Astoria, but I wasn't in Astoria. I had to be in Newburgh. So we're part of that continuing on. I also went to a Marine Reserves meeting to talk about the Falcon Cone Marine Reserves, and then I went to a CAFO meeting down in Bay City, Confined Animal Feeding Operations. And again, it's about science, because I didn't know anything about it, and I was curious about learning about the science. What it boils down to is that Clatsop County has 3 grade A, Class A farms. Tillamook has 88 of them. But the larger ones are over in eastern Oregon, something like 32,000 critters on one farm. What it boils down to is if we're concerned about water quality, this was hosted by the Tillamook Watershed Council. So Oregon Department of Agriculture was there, and the Oregon Dairy Farmers Association was there. So they talked about how all of this is monitored, what goes in, monitored and measured, what goes into the cattle, what comes out of the cattle from every orifice. I will not go into details there. But the point is, there's science involved, and there's science involved in protecting that. And this ties in because the Soil and Water Conservation District works as the kind of the friendly outreach arm of the Oregon Department of Agriculture to help farms in Clatsop County deal with animal waste and the impact on waters. So watersheds are being protected. Monday was Community Action Team, again, the meeting of the whole. I also talked with the sheriff about the idea that we're going to have a proposed increased tax. I asked if the industry group had been contacted. The sheriff said that was the job of the commissioners. So I've spent the last couple of days reading this packet and reaching out to ORLA, the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association, to discuss with them how do they feel about this proposal. So I hope that they will be willing to come and help us listen to what they have to say about it. Then yesterday, there was a meeting at the Arch Cape Fire Hall. You remember that we passed Ordinance 1702, where community organizations could meet and hear information about proposed community development. The room was full of people because people want a footpath and not a road onto West Ocean. One community member stood up and said that the landowner had a right to do what he wanted to with his land, whether it was a road or what. Finally, I want to talk about a couple of pieces from the Daily Astorian op-ed piece. A former county commissioner, Don Haskell, wrote a very interesting guest column about how we should observe democracy, or at least that's what the headline says. I recommend that, and I've got a copy of that if anybody wants to see it. Finally, a shout out to Jed, who's out there in the back row, who wrote a really very informative, articulate, working for us, help fight climate change op-ed piece yesterday in the Daily Astorian. Well done, Jed. Thank you, that's all I have.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Thank you. I guess I'd like to comment on this evening. Homelessness is a heartbreaking problem that we have nationally. And if you count the refugees, war refugees and political refugees around the world, it's a global problem. And so we're called upon as elected officials to try to solve this problem. And I am willing to work with everybody up here and the staff to try to come up with some kind of plan to do our contribution as a county. But I think it's important that we sit down and get it on paper first, and that's my objective. I know that Helping Hands is doing good work, and I wish them success with the Uniontown building. But this is a bigger problem than just one project. And this is a longer-term problem, probably, unfortunately, than just this one project. So I would like us to build on the work that's already been done and is being done. For instance, the 10-year plan that Clatsop County started in, what was it, 2002? You know, there are people that are doing this. There are cities that are doing this. We have a wonderful planning commission. We're going to add to that. These people that are on the planning commission care about planning. They have skills in looking at the different elements that it would take to maybe perhaps solve this problem. Let's engage them. Let's get citizens that are involved in advisory committees. Let's get them involved. What do you think? What do you think the solutions are? As we look at land that becomes back from tax credit, tax foreclosures, how can we started looking at that in the last year or two. How can we better use that process to help our situation? We're getting new employers in this area. You know, there's an ever-increasing need for workforce housing. How are we going to present that? If we are basing everything on profit, people are going to stay homeless because they're not going to be able to afford their rent. And so we need to work together to do this. Now, we may disagree on how we do this, but by golly, we are elected to talk together. Let's work together. Let's get some work sessions together. Let's get some people involved. We have the homelessness fund study coming up. We can refer to the one that was done at Tillamook. The city of Astoria is working on this. You know, we need to collaborate and come up with something, but let's get it on paper. Let's get a policy written based on our values and that's financially prudent. And that's what I'm asking for. And that's the passion that you saw with me tonight. That's how I feel about it. We have to think long-term. We have to think inclusively as much as possible. So that's where I'm coming from with that. For me, it's a moral issue. If you would have told me when I was a child that we'd be seeing what we see today, I never would have believed it. We have people sleeping on the sidewalk. We need to do something about it, but we need to do it in a way that makes sense and is helpful and financially prudent. So I guess the other thing I'd like to ask Chair Lee is there were some letters about the OCZMA, the Ocean Zone, on the executive board member. And I didn't quite understand those letters and what that meant, if you could help us on that. And that's all for me tonight. Thanks.
I'll explain that during the commissioner reports, Commissioner. Commissioner Nebaker.
In the interest of time, I will pass.
Commissioner.
Last week, I went to the United States Coast Guard change of command for Lieutenant Commander Tom Condit at Cape Disappointment. He is being succeeded by the first female Lieutenant Commander, Jessica Schaefer. She has big shoes to fill, but she's extremely qualified, a very long resume, not very old, but very successful. She is one of only 4 active duty female surfmen with that title, and which will come in handy at Cape Disappointment, being one of the most treacherous bars and active boating waterways. So it's pretty exciting. Lieutenant Commander Tom Condon and his family have been very active in our community for the last 3 years, and they've made a huge impact on many, many things. And they will definitely miss his leadership and outstanding citizenship. But I believe Lieutenant Commander Jessica Schaefer will do a great job. So that's my report.
Thank you. Attended the Oregon Coastal Zone Management Association meeting. Commissioner Sullivan had a question about that. Basically, what we came to, sorry, thank you. A couple things. So my term expired in the last meeting of my 2-year, and basically the board, the executive board of the Oregon Coastal Zone Management Association, we had a conversation and we decided that instead of assigning a new chair and vice chair, and that we would wait. And I was asked to serve as interim chair until the end of the year. And Councilor David Allen from Newport was asked to be vice chair till the end of the year. And this way, the executive community, there's a lot of there's a number of new commissioners that have gone away that didn't attend the meeting, and because they weren't reelected. And there's a number of new commissioners coming on, and it was the decision of the executive session is to now allow David and I to work as interim chair and vice chair, and then at the beginning of the year when the new boards take their seats, at the spring meeting of the Oregon Coastal Zone Management Association, they will announce and allow other commissioners to get involved. And so what we're opening this up to is for some new folks to become part of this great organization that works on the coast. So it was kind of a formality, but we needed to put that into resolution. And then also there are some, we did some appointments to some formality for OPAC appointments, and basically along the same line of thinking that we've got a lot of new commissioners coming online. We've got some new representatives. There's a lot of changes, and so it was our mind that we would allow these new commissioners and the counties to decide their liaisons and bring the opportunity for the new commissioners to become part of the organization. That was kind of like some more of the just the busy work of the executive board. And in our regular meeting, we had a wine rating conversation. We had Greg Wolf speak to us, and he talked about the Oregon Coast Trail. So basically, the Oregon Coast Trail is really neat. We've completed all but about 50 miles of it, and the last 50 miles are going to be the heaviest lift. And so this basically the Oregon Coast Trail is just a neat way to really promote the Oregon coast and the beautiful place that we live in. And so there's this trail that's going all the way down the coast. We got 50 miles, mostly the most difficult part to make the trail on. And we're working at raising money and promoting this trail, because it's in Europe they have these trails and people hike all day and then they stay at like a bed and breakfast and they hike the next day. And we have the Appalachian Trail that has been a real economic driver for rural Appalachian counties to bring thousands of people hike the Appalachian Trail. And what's neat about the Oregon Coast Trail, unlike the Pacific Crest Trail, which basically goes through wilderness, and at the end of the day there's always a hotel to stay at on the Oregon Coast Trail. And so this will attract a whole different kind of hiker, even slightly different, and it more models the European model. And what we've known is that the Oregon Trail is real interesting to folks that are older. It's easier. At the end of the day, you can go to a restaurant or get a room. It's not like you're at 4,000 feet and you have to be unassisted for 7 days at a time. So this is something that I've been kind of a true believer in for a long time. And there's a lot of other possibilities too. We're also working on a Salmonberry Trail. So we're going to connect the Oregon Coast Trail to Portland. through the Salmonberry Trail. And so this is the opportunity that we have to build these trail systems that attract people from all over the world. And that was really interesting to be a part of that. A lot's going on. We had a long discussion about the Coastal Coho lawsuit, kind of talked about the Lynn County lawsuit. We talked about OPAC and its role in the future. And another thing we talked about, the reauthorizing of the Magnuson-Stevens Act, which is a huge fishing thing. And if you notice, we just caught a Chinese trawler out in the middle of the ocean stealing our salmon. And so that's kind of connected to that stuff. And we talked a wide-ranging other counties are interested in our needle exchange program, which is kind of neat. And we talked about the Chinook tribes and their winning of the 7 of the 8 lawsuits, which is huge. And we talked about the Maritime Workforce Sector Task Force. And what we're trying to do is strengthen our maritime training and like the MERTS campus, and there's some programs in Newport, and this is very important stuff. This also kind of segues to what you're going to do in your new job with the workforce. They're kind of working together. There's a lot of movement to, basically we're a shortage of folks that can work on boats. And I understand that because I worked on, by the time I was 24 years old, I would vow I'd never go on the ocean again. So I did go back. Other than that, I do not have anything else. County Manager Moore.
Yeah, actually just one item which could use some feedback from the commissioners on. I think it's sort of been well chronicled that as a commission and as a management team and a commission, we've had a few challenges being as effective as we could. We've tried to look for resources that might be available to come in and assist with helping us function better as a team. Clackamas County actually has staff who do this on a regular basis, and we've had some conversations with them. They have suggested maybe coming up and spending a couple hours with us, and one of the date that they've thrown out at this point, which I realize is coming up in 2.5, 3 weeks, is July 18th, and they're suggesting that maybe 6 in the evening till 8 in the evening.
I have on Halen River Scenic Designation meeting.
So maybe what I'll try to do is reach out to all of you and see if we can find a date that works for everybody, that also works for the folks from Clackamas County. There would be some cost associated to do this, but I don't think it would be, terribly expensive. That first session, I'm guessing, it sounds like it might be, like $2,000 to $3,000. We have to cover their cost to travel and their staff time to come up, staff time to prepare, that type of thing. So anyway, let me try to reach out to you and see if we can find a date, hopefully in the next 30 days or so that would work. So that's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.